The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Eastworks, a community of makers, artists, restaurants, and services located in the Mill District of East Hampton, where community happens. Learn more at eastworks.com.
Welcome to the Fabulous 413. I'm Khalees Smith.
And I'm Monty Belmonte.
And we're going to spend the bulk of this show in Beckett with Jacob's Pillow's own Renaissance man, Norton Owen.
We'll learn how the crucial pillar to the dance festival started as a student and has moved through the organization, landing at a position created for him, preservationist.
But first, time to get Monty back on his proverbial horse after all that time with the superfishes.
Cape Cod?
Cape Cod.
That's not too bad.
Okay, well, thanks.
Has this voice that's like Tom Waits. It's like Tom Waits of crows, and wakes up in the morning.
What's he building in there?
But anyway,
does the crow wake you up every day?
Yeah, with this voice, with this sound, like.
It reminds me of one of my favorite deep thoughts by Jack Handey, which is the crows seem to be calling his name, thought Caw. I love that one, but not when it's waking you up at 5 o'clock in the morning. But if you have to have a crow, you want it to be Tom Waits.
That is true, but it's also. I mean, I grew up in Pakistan, and so there are a lot of crows over there. And we do not like crows because they are going all the time, calling their names. But here it's rare, and yeah, I really don't like crows. And now my wife is also getting on board with that, with this particular one, this Tom Waits crow. He should at least wait, Wait,
give him a decent time. Let's say 8:30.
That's right.
Yeah.
Things a crow puts in its nest.
Time for some more kitchen table astronomy at the crow-bombarded kitchen table of Hampshire College astronomer Dr. Salman Hamid, Mr. Universe. We oftentimes talk about the majesty of the universe in many ways, and films, and I just want to take a brief aside and say, if you have not yet seen Life of Chuck, which is based on a Stephen King story, there is an awful lot about Carl Sagan's cosmic calendar in this. And I won't tell you any more other than if you love Carl Sagan and the cosmic calendar, go see Life of Chuck.
Well, thank you for spoiling
It's not a spoiler.
Monty.
It's one thing they mention in it. I don't want to say how they mention it or why.
I was planning on seeing it because it is playing at Amherst Cinema,
Where you are a board member.
and it was on my list of things, and I should mention because of Father's Day. So every Father's Day, I get an opportunity to actually watch Carl Sagan's Cosmos.
Yeah.
Because
is that what you do for like a tradition for Father's Day?
Yeah, because
I love that.
Because my kid is forced to watch a show that from 45 years ago.
Our ancestors worshipped the sun, and they were far from foolish. It makes good sense to revere the sun and the stars, because we are their children.
But it's still pretty good, and so yesterday we watched that part of it, half of it, because I don't want to torture them because they go like, oh my goodness, this is like, so old. But it's so good. And then we watched Interstellar. I was actually surprised. I had not seen it in a while, but Interstellar is also a perfect Father's Day film.
I've got kids, Professor. Get out there and save them.
Anyway.
Next Father's Day, I make my kids watch Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure on my birthday. So I know the drill.
Excellent!
But the other thing that's magnificent about the universe is, why do we need to be spending billions of dollars on these space telescopes when the universe itself is a giant telescope? And we are using the universe as a lens to see things close to the beginning of the Big Bang.
Okay, don't say that. I would rephrase that. Don't say we don't need telescopes for that, because otherwise Doge is going to come in and shut down James Webb Space Telescope.
Yeah, please don't.
But you are right. What I want to talk about is a really cool result that has come out. And there was a meeting going on, annual meeting of American Astronomical Society. This time it was in Anchorage, Alaska. I didn't go, but I saw beautiful pictures from astronomers posting it on Facebook and other places.
I bet the sky looks great there.
Yeah, so next time Alaska, and no, it was beautiful. But one of the results that came out was that there is a mystery about what happened early in the universe. And when I'm talking about early, it's a few 100 million years after the Big Bang.
Which is a long time in human time, but in astronomical time is practically no time.
That's right. And so one of the mysteries is that at some point, a few 100,000 years after the Big Bang, the universe earlier on, before that, was completely opaque because it was so dense that light could not freely travel. Photons would hit electrons and protons and things like that. So basically, it would be an opaque place if you were there. And we do not see that light. The first time we see light freely flowing in the universe is a few 100,000 years after the Big Bang, which is called cosmic microwave background radiation. This was the evidence for the Big Bang, because this kind of light, that as the universe expands, it cools a little. And then roughly 400,000 years after the Big Bang, it was cool enough that the electrons could actually combine with protons to form a lot of hydrogen and helium as well, but mostly it's called recombination. It got cooled enough that electrons combined with protons to have hydrogen. Now, this is when the universe in some ways became transparent. And that light, that cosmic microwave background radiation, is everywhere all around us because we are all part of the Big Bang.
The Big Bang didn't happen somewhere far away. The Big Bang happened right where you are right now. The Big Bang happened everywhere.
That's right. And so you have this hydrogen, in some sense, a fog that actually is left out at the time. But over the period of time, over the first billion years, that fog of hydrogen clears out as well. Meaning to say that electron in a hydrogen gets knocked out. It's called reionization or ionization. The process was called ionization, but it used to be the case before, the first few 100,000 years, and then it became again after a billion years. And so the light could even more freely flow, and this fog of hydrogen lifted. So there was a big question. What caused this reionization? Meaning to say, what are those stars? Are those black holes? Are those big galaxies? Are those small galaxies? What kicked off those electrons from the hydrogen atoms within about 1 billion years after the Big Bang? And this was a mystery we didn't know, but now one of the results that were announced at the American Astronomical Society, there may be a solution to that. And we can talk about the exact solution, but what I think is fascinating is how astronomers figured it out. And I think this is where your earlier comment...
using the universe as a telescope itself came into play.
Right, so because we are looking at a universe 800 million years or 900 million years after the Big Bang, that's when some things happen. We want to study that. And so astronomers used a big cluster of galaxies. Its nickname is Pandora's cluster.
Uh-oh. Don't open that cluster.
And there are a lot of galaxies in there. So this is not a star cluster, but a cluster of galaxies. And it is located about 4 billion light years from us. So it's not as far as we are trying to look at, but it's somewhere in between. But because it has a lot of mass in it, because it's a cluster of galaxies and there are a lot of galaxies in it, it can bend light that is coming from behind it or farther away from it. So this is called gravitational lensing. This is something that was predicted from Einstein's general theory of relativity. But astronomers now use it to look or magnify objects from way back. So basically, if you bend light, you can use it as a lens.
It's how magnifying lenses work here on Earth. It's how your glasses work. But we have taken a cluster of galaxies called Pandora's cluster and turned it into a giant lens to look farther back in the universe than we would have been able to without using the universe as a telescope.
And it's still very hard. You need a telescope to have this resolution, or sort of to peer both faint light that has been magnified from the past, but also to have an accuracy to identify that, this little smudge that you see, that is actually a light coming from a galaxy far, far away and is not part of that cluster. So first of all, this is just incredible. This is really cool to do that. And the telescope that can do that is James Webb Space Telescope.
So we do need a real telescope to do it too.
Before that, Hubble Space Telescope did that. But James Webb Space Telescope is actually one of its key goals was to do this type of science. And it has done that. So what astronomers have found, they identified about 83 objects that are way farther back, but they are being magnified. And out of those, they closely studied 20 of those galaxies. So those 20 galaxies are not at 4 billion light years away, which is already quite far. Those objects are much farther away when the universe was only 800 million years old. So that light, so this cluster of galaxies is in between. These 20 objects they studied are way, way, way out. and they are very small. So what they found is that, and the light normally you wouldn't be able to see, but because of the cluster, it gets magnified, and James Webb Space Telescope sees that. Okay, all of that stuff is really cool already. But why are these objects crucial, and why do they give us an answer regarding what knocked off those electrons from hydrogen fog? Well, because they detected in these small galaxies. So first of all, they are small in size, but they found out that there is a lot of star formation going on. It's called a starburst, meaning it's like
Delicious.
Berries and cream, oh, little berries and cream.
a lot of star formation going on, and the reason they know that is because of a particular detection of an atom, and that is of an oxygen atom. So there is a particular line that when stars or a lot of stars are forming, you can knock out 2 electrons from an oxygen atom, and that usually gives you a sign, aha, there's a lot of star formation going on. Now, this particular line, and the reason I'm going into this detail, again, don't worry about the details, but think about the type of things that astronomers have thought about to use it to answer questions. So this oxygen signature, you can think about it that way, from this galaxy, or these galaxies that is coming in from a few 100 million years after the Big Bang, is in the visible light.
So you could see it with your own human eyes.
Well, if you had those gigantic human eyes, but you cannot. Because of the expansion of the universe, that visible light has been stretched into the infrared.
Quick pause. At some point in the very distant future, we will not be able to see any stars from Earth, if Earth exists, in visible light, because the light will have been stretched too far. The stars will be too far away. The light will no longer reach us. The end.
I won't go that far, but in the very, very far future, there won't be anything left, but that's a whole other thing.
Anyway.
I think that will get us into a different territory. But this light that got stretched, so this was this particular oxygen atoms where 2 electrons are being stripped out. This happens when you are close to star-forming regions, and that light usually is in the visible, but because it has been stretched, it is in the infrared. Now, that particular light, is also been magnified through this cluster, and because it is in the infrared, it is perfectly suited to be detected by James Webb Space Telescope, which works in the infrared. So astronomers have discovered that these kind of galaxies, there are some analogs today as well, but the contributions to this kind of light is actually a lot less today. But they think that a billion years after the Big Bang or before, these small galaxies, because of their high star formation, were enough to re-ionize the universe or to knock out that electron from the hydrogen fog. So that is really cool, but that's not the best part. What I wanted to highlight was just think about the kind of things, somebody has to think about the fact that here is a cluster of galaxies, and you know what? You can actually look at that cluster to find out objects that are farther away. It can magnify light. And that light, by the way, would get stretched out. The signals that you have, the signature of star formation is going to stretch out in the infrared. So let's have a telescope that can detect that kind of light around the cluster, magnified from the cluster. I mean, I think it's just phenomenal how science progresses and how people have thought about these things and the beauty of it. First of all, you should also check out the images. Actually, those, I mean, if you search for Pandora's cluster and stars or galaxies, you are going to find this news item and those stories.
Don't accidentally sign up for Spotify's cluster. Pandora's cluster is older.
And also go to the James Webb Space Telescope website that actually has it highlighted. Those are beautiful images of that. And again, you're seeing these smudges, but those smudges are telling you so much about early universe. And just remember that these images are available for you to look at, for you to enjoy, for you to share, for you to use as a desktop.
Or for you to create an album surrounding or to use as your album art, because we, as U.S. taxpayers, paid for this. It is public domain and usable for whatever you want. It's part of what we've decided to do with some of our tax dollars to help benefit not only science, but aesthetics.
and you can use it, they're copyright free, And this is a key component that science should be shared. And I think US science has done a great job in terms of promoting that type of thing. And it should be continued. And this is the reason why we need public support for NASA and NSF, because it is this type of science that comes out of it.
And now who knows what's going to happen with some of our favorite science programming now that the Corporation for Public Broadcasting is one Senate vote away from being defunded. What'll happen to NOVA?
Yeah, well. And that is one of these issues that while we are talking about science and science funding, don't forget that how we talk about science and what medium we talk about science. So yeah, I mean, these are all things that are crucial, and that's why we should not lose sight. I mean, we could have just talked about the cluster of galaxies, but I think it's important of how we get to know about it, what's the beauty of it, and what to do with that. And I think what to do with that is something to know that it is for public benefit and it is for everyone. Let's keep on sharing this science.
Speaking of opening boxes, we'll now take you to Beckett,
where we open up 50 years of living history at a dance institution.
We'll introduce you to preservationist extraordinaire Norton Owen at Jacob's Pillow and the space named in his honor next.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by the Handle Factory Community Clay Studio in Shelburne Falls, offering summer youth clay and art camps and classes for adults. Learn more at handlefactory.com. The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Window World of Western Mass, a local family business with experienced craftsmen offering skylights, siding, gutters, and doors. windowworldofwesternma.com.
We are at Jacob's Pillow in Beckett, the Jacob's Pillow Dance Festival, with someone who's got to be here longer than anyone else, right?
That's true at this point, yes.
Norton Owen, who is celebrating 50 years of a relationship with Jacob's Pillow this year, and we're walking through the grounds.
Past the Ted Shawn Theater.
Your role here is a preservationist and an archivist, and we're walking to the archive, but as we're walking, you're saying this whole place is a big archive.
Well, it is. It really is. We have buildings here that have been used for decades. Some of them were built by Ted Shawn's Company of Men Dancers in the 1930s. We're just walking past the Ted Shawn Theater, which was built in 1942 as the first theater in America especially for dance. Of course, we're getting ready to open the Doris Duke Theater, which will be making history of its own, in a sense. I think of the whole place as a living museum in a certain kind of way. And I often say to people, the show really, people talk about curtain time, and I think, well, the curtain time here at the Pillow starts when you open your car door.
Yeah.
Because the whole place is an experience.
It might even be the drive here.
Well, that too. So it starts before. Yes, all right. Yeah.
I'm sure the people in the community of Beckett come frequently too, but
yes, they do.
A lot of people coming from outside are going to have a miraculous drive almost no matter which way you come.
It's so pretty, the drive here.
We're lucky that it's a beautiful day today.
Yeah.
That smiles on us most of the time. Now we're going to go into the archives.
Jacob's Pillow Archives, the Stephen Driscoll Collection Norton Owen Reading Room.
Hey,
that's
ta-da. Yes, come on in.
I don't think people would necessarily think of Dance Festival having an archive on hand.
But we do, and in fact, what our collection is mostly about is about documenting what has happened here at the Pillow over these past 90-plus seasons. And so the idea of having that gathered together so that our visitors can experience that is really a big part of what people get when they come here. Yes, they're seeing a performance, but it's within a context, and we're not keeping that context a secret. We want people to feel that and see that and understand that. That's why we make all of these materials and all of what we have around us, which, to just describe for the listeners, is books and paintings and posters and photographs and videos, all kinds of remnants of the dance that has occurred here over the past decades.
When you walk in the door of the archives, you're immediately greeted by these two giant paintings. Tell us about what these are.
So they're 100 years old. They were painted in 1925 of our founder, Ted Shawn, and his wife and partner, Ruth St. Dennis. And they originally hung in a building called Denishon House. They had a company that combined their names as Denishon, and they had a studio in the Bronx. And these really large paintings were done by Albert Herder, who was a very distinguished portrait artist of the time, who was also a friend of theirs and created these portraits to emphasize their stature as important people in the dance community. They were part of Ted Shawn's personal estate. So after he died in 1972, they disappeared for a few years. And then in 1982, we suddenly learned on the eve that they were going to be auctioned off, that they were being put on sale, and we bought them back.
Ah, nice. So. And you were already here.
And I was already here. Yeah. I was old to hat by then.
I mean, you've been an archivist and a writer and a curator. Talk a little bit about the difference and influence between the Ted Shawn dancers and Denishon.
Well, it was an evolution because Denishon came first, and they were around from 1914 through around 1930. And that was when Ted Shawn and Ruth St. Dennis parted ways, although they never divorced. And Shawn came here eventually. He bought the place in 1931, but the first time that there were performances here was 1933, and that's what we date our beginnings from. Mm-hmm. And by that time, I mean, partly because he had separated from St. Dennis, but also he was turning the page, and he was moving on to the next chapter. They had, as Denishon, some of their students had been Martha Graham, Doris Humphrey, Charles Weidman, Jack Cole, those people who were really regarded as the next generation of modern dancers in this country.
And are now regarded as the icons of dance.
Yeah, absolutely.
Monumental in the movement of modern dance.
Yeah, and Shawn was not going to be left behind in the dust either. You know, the fact that he was moving on and establishing a company of just men dancers, which had never been done before in this country. And already Denishon had been the first dance company of any kind in this country. And then 15 years later or whatever, for him to then found the first men's company, which he felt was essential because he felt that men in dance needed a leg up, if you will. But that they needed to have their reputations respected, and that this was something that he didn't think was the case. And so he gave it attention for the whole decade of the 30s, then from 1933 when he founded the company until they disbanded in 1940. I mean, he said that he felt like his point had been made, the job had been done, but also everybody was getting drafted. So, you know, the country was getting ready to go into World War II, and he was not able to keep a company of men together at that point. You know, it had
joined a different type of company altogether.
Yes, indeed, they did. But you know, then of course after the war, and we continued here, I should say, during World War II, which many of our colleague institutions in the Berkshires, such as Tanglewood, the theater festivals, just shut down during that time. I've always drawn a lot of inspiration from the fact that we continued. And that, of course, came into focus during the pandemic at a time when we couldn't continue in 2020 and didn't have a conventional festival, even though we still counted as one because we were online. But it didn't stop during the World War. And, of course, we began during the Depression. So the idea of being able to make art, no matter what the circumstances, is something that we consider a birthright here, and it's something we're still doing.
We're speaking with Norton Owen, who is the preservationist here at Jacob's Pillow in Beckett, who is celebrating 50 years here at Jacob's Pillow, and we are in the archives, disturbing all of the people that are looking through the archives.
We're so sorry, but it's so cool here, and we wanted to be where the books and all of the materials were instead of in the studio.
Yeah, maybe we'll overhear something that sounds interesting to you. That's the whole point of radio in the first place. So yeah,
Chime in, make it weird. What was it like here when you joined the staff at Jacob's Pillow?
Well, I came here originally as a student. It's funny that as I'm saying those words, I can look out this window here and see the place where my cabin was. It was torn down. I regret to say it has not been preserved as a shrine. But anyway, I came here as a student, and I performed here, and I was working on the backstage crew in exchange for my scholarship. And it was magic to me, and I kept finding ways to keep coming. You know, it was not at that time like, oh, I'll be the director of preservation here someday, because there wasn't such a thing, first of all. And
Right, it was a role kind of created for you, right?
it was very much created for me, and I didn't necessarily see a path forward other than to say, gee, I'd really like to continue coming here if I can. And the following year, the director offered me he said, well, you can come back as a student and you could perform and do the same things you did, or I could give you a job in the box office for $50 a week. And of course, my little money-grubbing eyes lit up at that and thought, oh, wow, $50 a week. How could I turn that down? And then it just tumbled on from there. I did a lot of different things. I have done a lot of different things here over the years. For the longest period of time, I was, for 5 years, the director of educational programs in the 80s. But then in 1990 was when the director at the time, Sam Miller, recognized my relationship with the past of the Pillow, because I'd been doing all these things even though there was no job for it, but I just was compelled. You know, I felt like it was a really important thing and what needed to be done. Sam recognized that and gave me the title Director of Preservation. It was a part-time job at that point, but it has continued and has grown exponentially. And so here we are.
It's good that they keep making more festivals because
Yeah.
we have more stuff to archive.
Well, I say that all the time, Monty. You know, I say my job keeps getting harder and harder because we have more and more. And really, largely what we're documenting, I mean, we're not trying to document all dance everywhere all the time, but I will say that this is quite a center for dance from all over the world. Even staying here in rural Beckett, we have the dance world coming to us, and we're then documenting that. And this is not new. I mean, this is something that we've been doing since the 1940s in terms of bringing companies here from elsewhere, and we're still doing it.
More coming up with Norton Owen, preservationist at Jacob's Pillow, as we head next door from the archive into the exhibition space.
We'll see the previous display of first-run prints of slides in the archive while learning about what dance photos will go up for the 2025 season.
And learn what the archivist has planned to exhibit in some of the performance spaces this summer.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
We're speaking with Norton Owen, who for 50 years has been associated with Jacob's Pillow Dance Festival here in Beckett. He is the preservationist, and we are in the archives that are named in honor of you in part. Show us something cool in here, Norton.
Let's walk into the exhibition space, which has changing exhibitions. Every year it's something different. This was last summer's exhibition, so we'll be changing this before we open this year. But I particularly wanted you to see this, and sorry, listeners, that you can't see this, but you can go to our website and find actually a version of this exhibition that is online. We call this exhibit John Lindquist as of today, because they are photographs that were taken by our longtime staff photographer, John Lindquist, who was photographing here for 42 years.
Got him beat.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, thank you very much. I have indeed beat his record. He photographed in black and white, which he would print those photos himself, but then he also photographed in color on Kodachrome. And so those were slides, basically. Those would come back to him as slides from the lab. And he would do slideshows. But at that point in time, it was really prohibitively expensive for him to create prints. So what we're standing in here is an exhibition of color prints that had never been printed before, and allowing people to see artists from 1938 as the earliest image here to 1980 in living color in a way that has been blowing people's minds, honestly. I mean, it's funny because nobody would actually say that they believed that the world was in black and white before a certain point in time, but I think we think that way sometimes.
Absolutely. Anytime they do like any sort of colorization of a movie reel from the early 20th century, it looks fake.
Right. Yeah.
What are you doing?
Yeah.
If you don't get it picked up by a tornado and dropped on a witch,
yeah,
color doesn't exist in your time.
Yeah. It's true. And, I think that's a fundamental way of distancing the past that I wish didn't exist. Because, in fact, people did exist in full color and they existed in 3 dimensions. And these images help viewers to recognize that and recognize actually, oh, maybe there's not that much difference between us and people who danced here 60, 70, 80 years ago.
These photographs look gorgeous. They look like photographs that could have been taken yesterday, and the lighting looks amazing, and the colors are so vibrant.
And the moments are so well chosen. Like I'm looking directly at this one where the woman looks like she's floating. She's mid-jump, and the dress comes down below where her feet are in the mid-jump, so it really just looks like she's hovering above the trees, and it's so cool.
Yeah, and then you think about how expensive it would have been to have made mistakes, and how much film you'd have to go through to get the perfect right one. Not like right now, you just hold the button down and delete later.
It was not like digital photography, let us just say. And, this was a partnership, this exhibition was a partnership with the Harvard Theater Collection, because all of John Lindquist's photographs, 99% of them were taken here at Jacob's Pillow, but at the time that he died, which was 1980, we didn't have an archive. We didn't have a way of caring for them, and so his estate decided instead to give them to the Harvard Theater Collection, which was, I participated in that choice, and there are times I kick myself for it, but, truly we didn't have a way of taking care of it at that time, so that seemed to be the most responsible choice. And they've done incredible things. The fact that we had access to these is because they digitized his slides, and there were 15,000 of them. So I went through 15,000 images on their website, which is miraculous that you can do that, and chose these 75 or so that are in the exhibit.
You mentioned going through 15,000 photos, but there's so much curation going on here across the board. But talk about the curation of these exhibits that you have next door to the archives in conjunction to what's going on with the rest of the festival.
Yeah, well, we try to make it immersive in the way that people will get something from seeing the exhibition that will enhance what they're experiencing live on stage. And it's not prescriptive. People find their own connections, which is beautiful. That's art, isn't it? That you can find your own meaning in a sense. But they do work in a synergistic way, that by showing people what has happened here over the years, at the same time they're seeing something that might be brand new, that makes some kind of magic happen, I think, in the individual viewer that really I don't see happening anywhere else in quite that way. So they really all work together. And in terms of what we're doing here this summer in the exhibition space, I would say with some modesty, it's going to be an exhibition about my 50 years at the Pillow.
Well.
Yeah. So,
do you have to curate your own exhibition?
No.
Good.
Thankfully. What I hope will be evident because it does look back over, it's going to look back over 50 years, more than half of the Pillow's history. Even though I am the subject in some ways, it's also what I've been looking at is the real subject. It's the dancers who have been here. It's not just, be aware, listeners, that it's not just an exhibition of pictures of me, because that would get old fast. But a lot also of things from exhibitions that I've done here in the past. I think raising up the whole idea of what is documentation and what is this role here and how does that fit into what people are seeing today. So here's a picture of Carmen de Lavalade. She just had her 94th birthday. She was the person who first got Alvin Ailey into a dance studio. They were students together in junior high school and high school in Los Angeles. And she was a dancer, and so saw this beautiful specimen who was mostly working in gymnastics at that time, but she thought he should be a dancer. And let us just say she was right. And this particular photo comes to mind because it was taken in 1964. It's Carmen de Lavalade in an Alvin Ailey premiere that was created for The Pillow called The 12 Gates. I don't believe it was ever performed anywhere else. It was sort of like an occasion piece, which he made to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Ruth St. Dennis and Ted Shawn, who were, despite the fact they hadn't lived together for 30 years, were celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary here in 1964. So Carmen danced here in this premiere of Alvin Ailey's, and here it is on the wall. I mean, you know, it just brings everything sort of together in a magical way, particularly because we have the Ailey Company coming back this year. And it will be the first time since the 1960s that the full company has performed here. That is exciting in itself to us. I'm putting together an exhibit for the lobby of the Ted Shawn Theater called Ailey Connections, which will highlight some of those connections over the years. But again, to talk about how these things work together, imagine the excitement of that week, which is the final week in our season, for people to be able to be coming to see the Ailey Company and to walk through an exhibition that has all of these reverberations in it, all these memories from the past decades.
And the wreath and the memories are so accessible is because of your hard work over the last 50 years, Norton.
Well, thank you. It works magic for me, and I feel like, and I have observed how it works magic for other people as well. That really has been my motivation, to want to make that incredible, amazing synergy work for anybody who comes here. You don't have to be a dance scholar. You don't have to be somebody who knows all this stuff. We really serve it up for the visitors and have it be something that anybody can observe and appreciate and get excited about.
What could you share most with our listeners about the experience of dancing at Jacob's Pillow Festival?
Well, you know, what's incredible about the Ted Shawn Theater in particular, which is about a 600-seat theater, it's all wood construction. The all wood construction is one thing that would seem to be like, well, what difference would that make? Well, it makes a lot of difference, actually, in terms of the liveness of the space, particularly if you're seeing something like a percussive dance form like tap or Spanish dance that uses the floor. But even in ballet, where, you know, people might be doing a jump or something, and it's subtle, but, you know, you sort of feel that in your seat because it causes a vibration. You know, there's that, but there's also the intimacy of these spaces. I mean, when I talk about the 600-seat Ted Shawn Theater, that's our largest indoor space on the one hand, but Alvin Ailey Company performs at City Center in New York, and that's, I don't know, it's 3,000 seats or something. And, you know, it's like 4 or 5 times the size of the Ted Shawn Theater. To see a company like that, or to see the Paul Taylor Company, or to see the Sarasota Ballet, which you have this summer, or Ballet BC, many others that I can name. Oh my God, that's incredible. You're so close that you almost feel like you can reach out and touch the performer. Don't, but you know, but you have that feeling.
But what we really want to see is the basement, like at the Alamo.
Except that this one actually exists, and it holds wicked cool artifacts of Jacob's Pillow's history.
We'll also learn more about their digital archive and how Jacob's Pillow is making its catalogs more available to more people around the globe with 50-year reigning preservationist Norton Owen.
No one shall take his title. You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Northeast Solar, homegrown in Hatfield, Massachusetts, and providing energy savings for their customers for over 10 years. Learn more at northeast-solar.com.
I love it when people come here and get bitten by the dance bug, and that's different from the mosquitoes, which are also here. Yes. The dance bug is a good thing, not a bad thing, and hopefully that means that they leave here and want to go see more dance because they've been so excited. That is a feeling that the artists themselves have when they're here, and we capitalize on that to some degree because we're also filming them and photographing them and capturing them in this act of performance. And so, yes, absolutely, it informs the experience of what we are going to save and preserve for future generations.
Norton Owen, you came here to Jacob's Pillow 50 years ago as a dancer. Do you still dance?
I do, as a matter of fact.
I love that. I'm so glad to hear that.
I feel like I've just been asked the question that I've sometimes repeated for other people, which is the very oldest person in the world at a certain point in time was being interviewed, and she was asked what kind of future she foresaw, and she said, a very short one. So in my case, I would say, what kind of dancing do I do? Well, not as strenuous as what I might have done before. I have been, for the last several years, playing the part of grandfather in a production of Peter and the Wolf, which Isaac Mizrahi and John Higginbotham do at the Guggenheim in New York. So, and that is a perennial thing that seems to come around every Christmas time. And haven't heard about next year yet, but if Isaac and John, if you're listening, please, I want to come back and do it again.
The last time we got to talk to you was about a restoration of the Red Shoes, important to both dance and film. One of the important things about the archive is how much video there is here for people to check out and see previous performances. But in the keeping of that archive, what have you seen change about the way that dance is filmed here at Jacob's Pillow?
Well, like everything. I mean, we're lucky in that we have films that go back to the first year. We have films from 1933. That's incredible. That was black and white, silent film. We're no longer documenting that way, first of all. Our videos now are born digital, of course, 4K, and, so wonderful in that way. But the keeping of them is, of course, vastly different. Yes, they're born digital. Hey, hooray, they'll last forever. Well, maybe, but you have to also maintain, a file. Just because you've created it doesn't mean that it lasts. It has to be kept, and this is part of our work here. Then when you talk about the number of videos that we have and the amount of digital storage space that takes up, that's huge, and that's one of the things that we're working on at this point to safeguard that in a way that is sustainable, because it's very expensive. These are huge files, but that's not going to deter us. We want very much, we're creating these wonderful documents at this point, and we're creating them for the purpose of people in future generations being able to come back and see them.
And then the beauty of that, too, in the digital age is before we came to Jacob's Pillow in Beckett and did this beautiful drive to a real physical space and talked to human beings in real life, I was poking around on the Digital Archives website, and it's amazing. There's so many cool, wonderful videos that people can at any time go and check out.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. And, I mean, you experienced it sort of backwards from the way we conceived it, because, Of course, we had an archive here. We had this stuff and this way for people to come and see things here, and then started to think about, well, we need to reach out, and because not everybody can come to this mountaintop in Beckett, we need to find ways to make that accessible to people wherever they might be. And hopefully in a way that has at least some element of the magic that I talked about that I think is inherent here.
I think you find that in your podcast, Pillow Talk, which goes through the archives and brings out talks and pieces that you've preserved over the years and brings them into more accessible little bits. Part of the opening ceremonies for the festival is a tribute and a celebration of those 50 years that you've spent here. What's happening at your party?
And we invited to the after party, Norton Owen.
Yeah, good times. Yeah, I'm receiving the Jacob's Pillow Dance Award, which is quite an honor. We started this award in 2007, and when I look at previous recipients, people like Merce Cunningham and Bill T. Jones and Misty Copeland and
Bill T. Jones, who's going to be a part of this year's festival.
Yes, indeed. It sort of gives me it takes me to that game that feel like we all play as children, or where you have a list of things and you say which one doesn't belong. I kind of feel like people would pick out Norton Owen and go, what's he doing in there with all the but I really treasure the fact that the Pillow is giving me this award, and Pam Tadji, our director, has articulated that she feels like it's an award for creative visionaries, and that my role here at the Pillow has been about figuring out a way that we can bring all of the Pillow into focus for visitors, and it's very rewarding and gratifying to see that work blossom.
This is not for public consumption. We're in the basement of the archives here at Jacob's Pillow right now, which is even cooler.
It is even cooler.
So this is where we really keep everything. So the upstairs that we've just been in is where we share it, where we present it to the public. But that's the tip of the iceberg. And down here is the iceberg.
This is awesome. There's more photos down here.
There's a sword.
You can see reels, like actual reels.
Yeah,
of
old
film.
reels of
Yes,
film.
indeed. Those date back to, let me show you over here. One of my favorite show and tells is, here's a box from Eastman Kodak that's still addressed to Ted Shawn in Westport, Connecticut, because that was before he came to Jacob's Pillow.
Wow.
The postmark on this is 1928. So,
has that been preserved?
And it has been. All of these films that we're looking at here in canisters have all been digitized, and so they are available, in other ways. But, it's still instructive and also important to keep the originals, though at some point it may be possible to and necessary to go back to the film for some reason. So we still have those here. And so much else.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you see some mannequins here, and you see some trunks behind them. These trunks were the touring trunks from Dennis Shawn and Ted Shawn's Men Dancers.
Wow.
And the costumes that they used were stored in these trunks for decades. We have, within the last few years, taken them out and cataloged those, and that's what's in all of these big boxes over here.
Yeah, 2 years ago, as part of the display, you had a couple of the costumes out for people to look at.
And we will have costumes this summer, so part of the exhibition about my time here will incorporate costumes, because that's been a big part of what I brought forward. And there were certainly times in the past when other people on the staff here would say, can't we get rid of these trunks, and I was holding on for dear life. No, no, we can't. What I think is funny about this is that when we were first bringing the archives into this building, we thought this would be plenty of space to have all of our collections. The joke's on me, because I was involved, of course, in planning this, but I wasn't planning on all the ways that we've expanded.
You moved into the Blake Barn
in the early 90s.
In the early 90s. So it's been 30 years since that first move. How severely did you underestimate?
Oh, pretty severely, I would say. It was partly that, we had only kept certain kinds of materials over the years, and the whole concept of having an archive has just exploded for us. That's a bad term to use, I guess. We don't want the archives to explode.
Especially with all these film canisters.
Expanded, let's say that.
Bursting at the seams.
Thank you.
When inevitably this basement fills up entirely, where do you go?
To the Great Dance Archive in the sky.
Somebody else's problem now. See ya.
This is sort of the germ of the Ailey exhibit that I was telling you about.
Cool.
These are some of the Ailey images that we'll have in that exhibition.
So great. Cool. Yeah, very cool.
So Oh, so cool.
I'm very lucky to be surrounded by this all the time. You know, it's a wonderfully rich atmosphere to be in. And obviously for me personally, having lived through 50 seasons of that myself, you know, when I look around and my eyes light on something that I've experienced, it's powerful. And, you know, what's really fun during the summertime is that people get to come and experience all this. And I get to witness that, which is, you know, one of my greatest joys in life is to see people poking around here and seeing all the things and taking delight in it, you know, enjoying it, feeling enriched by it, and knowing that I've had a part in making that happen. That's incredibly gratifying.
It's worth it if you're coming to a performance to come a little bit early and stop in the archive and check out a video of something that maybe you missed in the past couple of years, or maybe you weren't alive for.
Yeah. Even things that I wasn't alive for.
Yeah.
Believe it or not.
The season opening gala at Jacob's Pillow happens this Saturday, June 21st, but it's currently at capacity. So if you'd like to see Norton Owen be lauded for his 5 decades of service, head to Jacob's Pillow's website to put yourself on their wait list or to check out any of the other shows coming to the Berkshires, including Alvin Ailey, for the final week of the festival.
And we will say that the ceremony for the gala is being live streamed, but find out how to do that on their website too. On the next Fabulous 413, we'll sit with Britt Rue of Commonwealth Murals and discover 2 ways that the public can get involved with public art this month: their Juneteenth Murals bus tour and a local paint event happening at White Lion Brewery.
We'll also bring composer, saxophonist, bandleader Felipe Salas in to explore his latest album, Camera Obscura.
And with the last couple of days of sun rescuing our strawberry picking dreams, we head to the Dickinson farm in Granby to chat with farmer Nate LaFlemme about the sweet berry legacy of his family's farm.
I'm Monty Belmonte.
Welcome back.
Thanks.
I'm Cleve Smith. We'll talk to you tomorrow on the Fabulous 413.